Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we will cover what training methods can have positive transfer to maximum velocity sprint performance. First, let's establish what exactly maximum velocity sprinting is. Quite simply, max velocity sprinting is the top speed an athlete can reach when sprinting in a straight line with maximal effort. So once the athlete has accelerated maximally, they end up at top speed, which can generally be maintained for around 20 to 30 meters before speed starts to decrease slightly. Max velocity speed can be beneficial for a large range of athletes. Obviously, track sprinters have the highest requirements for max speed, as this is the foundation of their sport. However, other athletes can also benefit from improving their top speed. Field sports such as soccer, the different codes of rugby, and the various football codes all require speed as an integral component of their sport. While these athletes rarely reach max velocity during competitive matches, top speed sprinting may still be beneficial for three primary reasons. First, improving your top speed will enhance acceleration ability. Athletes can only accelerate up to top speed. If an athlete can increase their top speed, they can raise their acceleration potential. This will improve acceleration speed and allow them to accelerate for longer distances. Since short distance sprints are so prevalent in field sports, this can have a positive impact on performance during competitive matches. The second benefit max velocity sprinting can have for field sport athletes is to increase their speed reserve. Speed reserve refers to the fact that during field sports, most sprints are submaximal in nature, meaning that they may only be running with 90% intensity. If we increase our top speed, this 90% now becomes 85%, for example, meaning that each effort is performed with a greater speed reserve. This means that the athlete can repeat sprint efforts with greater speeds, and they can actually continue to repeat sprints for more efforts throughout a match. The last and most important benefit max velocity sprinting has for field sport athletes is for injury risk reduction. This study found that sprint training induced more favorable hamstring adaptations compared with the Nordic hamstring exercise. Furthermore, this analysis demonstrated that regular sprinting and high-speed running were key elements of a training program that resulted in lower rates of muscular injury in elite soccer players. Now that we understand who can benefit from max velocity sprint training and why, we can now explore how to best train this quality. Let's cover the methods that can be beneficial at enhancing max velocity sprint speed. The first influencing factor that we will cover is the actual technique of max velocity sprinting. If athletes can run with efficient technique, they can make the most use of the physical qualities that they have. So what does effective technique look like? There will always be slight differences in sprinting technique based on individual variation, but there are some general technique considerations that make max velocity sprinting more efficient. First, we want to see the athlete in a tall and relaxed position. This means the shoulders shouldn't be shrugged and the upper body shouldn't be tense. In terms of the hips, we generally want the athlete to reach a hip flexion angle just below 90 degrees. This means that the thigh should nearly be parallel to the ground at its peak position. Before ground contact, we should see the ankle in a dorsiflexed position. This develops pre-tension in the foot and calf muscles and tendons so that when the athlete strikes the ground, they are already in a stiff position. During ground contact, we want to strike the ground slightly in front of the athlete's center of mass. Ground contact should be made on the ball of the foot rather than on the heels. The athlete should also be in near full hip and knee extension during ground contact, rather than in a more flexed position. After ground contact, we should see the knee flexed to keep the lower leg close to the body. An easy way to understand this is to have the athlete keep their heel close to the back of their thigh after ground contact. This reduces the circular circumference that the foot has to travel, making the recovery of the leg faster. Next, let's talk about sprint training itself. This is the most specific and most important method of training to develop max velocity sprint speed. Sprint training should always be performed in conjunction with other training methods for other training methods to have transfer to performance. When training to develop max velocity speed, we need to reach max velocity. This usually takes around 30 to 50 meters to reach depending on the athlete. So sprints should be at least 30 meters long to emphasize max velocity speed. Shorter distances than this will emphasize acceleration ability more than max velocity. We also want to avoid very long distance sprints that may cause speed to slow down due to fatigue. Once the athlete reaches around 80 to 100 meters, speed generally reduces slightly. While this may be a good training stimulus for speed endurance, we are not focusing on max velocity speed, and we want to avoid any reductions in top speed. So a good general range of sprint distances will be around 40 to 70 meters to focus purely on max velocity. It is also important to ensure athletes are given full recovery between sprints to ensure each effort is performed with maximal intent. If the athlete is fatigued, they won't be able to run as fast, and we are no longer training max velocity. The next method of training that can enhance max velocity sprint speed is overspeed sprinting. Overspeed sprinting is when the athlete uses some form of assistance to allow them to run at a faster speed than they normally would. This is very difficult to implement, as specialized equipment is usually required, and it can be fairly dangerous. Some methods of overspeed sprinting are towing with a rope, sprinting on a slight decline, or using specialized equipment like the 1080 sprint. Overspeed sprinting allows the athlete to move faster than they normally would, which forces their body to adapt to the extremely fast movements. This means that muscles have less time to produce force, the limbs have to move faster to prepare for the next stride, and ground reaction forces will be greater. While this training method may be useful, it is rarely implemented due to its practical difficulty. The next training method that can enhance max velocity sprinting is plyometric training. Plyometric training refers to exercises which have a high reliance on the stretch shortening cycle for performance. This form of training can help athletes become more efficient at using the stretch shortening cycle. This can make each ground contact more effective and ultimately lead to greater sprint speeds. When using plyometrics for max velocity sprinting, we want to use exercises with very fast stretch shortening cycles and short ground contact times. This is because max velocity sprinting involves very high ground reaction forces in very short contact times. Exercises such as pogo hops, drop jumps, and bounds are all good options that involve very short ground contact times. And the last primary training method that can have positive transfer to max velocity sprinting is isometric strength training. Isometric strength training refers to exerting maximal force against an immovable object. Therefore, the muscles don't actually change length and the joints don't move. This more closely replicates the muscle action seen during max velocity sprinting. Since ground contact times are so short, the foot, ankle, and knee joints don't actually move very much, so they don't undergo the same eccentric and concentric muscle actions seen during traditional strength training. Instead, the muscles actually act essentially isometrically, and the elastic tendons provide a rapid stretch and recoil. This allows a more efficient use of the stretch shortening cycle and provides energy elastically rather than purely muscularly. If athletes can become isometrically stronger in the ankle and knee joints, then during ground contact they can hold a more rigid joint position. This will increase joint stiffness and allow the tendons to be used more effectively. Athletes can implement isometric strength training by pushing against an immovable object maximally for around 3 to 10 seconds. An exercise for both the ankle and knee joints should be used to target the relevant muscles surrounding each joint. To learn more about the specifics of isometric strength training, you can find the video on this channel titled Sprint Specific Isometric Strength Training. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.